Number 1. I will never forget this experience. A while back, my mum and I were shopping for new sneakers as I was about to go into the first grade. It was in a Payless shoe store. My mum was paying attention to me because I was excited about these new Batman sneakers. Little known to us, there was a guy lurking behind a rack. My mum saw him on our way to the register. So we purchased the shoes and I was really happy about it. All of a sudden, this guy from the store comes charging at me. My mum rushes us into the car, locks the doors and calls my dad. The guy then proceeds to come to my window and start tapping on it. I had no idea what was going on. I was 7 and my mum just said, "Do not roll down your window." She pulled out a gun from the glove compartment, it was under lock and key, and yelled for him to get away. He scurried off and I never saw him again. I've always wondered what would have happened had he caught me. To the creep show at the shoe store? Let's not meet again. Number 2. I am a female. I was 15 and it was 1992. I lived in a Southern California suburb where everyone's backyard is full fenced in. We had a detached garage that could only be accessed from the alley or backyard. We also had an old wood shed that led to a gate going out to the alley. It was evening, but still light out. The sun was getting ready to set. My parents were on the verge of divorce, so my mum wasn't home, which was common most evenings. My dad worked nights, so he had an odd sleeping schedule. He also slept like a rock. When he was sleeping, it was often like being alone, because it was difficult to wake him. He was sleeping on the sofa just inside the back door. I went out to our garage to switch some of my laundry. Just over the dryer, there was a window facing the wood shed where our gate was. I knelt down to pull some clothes out of the dryer, and when I stood up, there was a man looking in at me. He was in our backyard. The gate behind him was closed. It was a really loud gate, so when someone opened and closed it, you definitely heard it, even from inside the house. I hadn't heard it, so it was clear that he had been there while I walked out and he had watched me. He didn't say anything that I can recall. He just started to walk towards the door to get into the garage. I remember just thinking, I need to get out of this garage because otherwise he will come in and I will be trapped in here. This was because the garage door opener was right next to the door. You had to walk through to get in from the backyard, the door I came through. I ran out into the backyard, where he was. I had no other choice. The back door to our house consisted of French doors, and the one door was open because I often left it open when I was just running out to grab the laundry. I thought about running into the house, but he wasn't very far from me, and I was afraid he would run in behind me before I could run in and lock the door. He was probably in his late 30s, maybe around 5'9", and had longer hair. He started to just walk towards me without saying anything. I froze. I thought perhaps I could run past him around the side of our house and jump the 4-foot fence to the front yard and run and start screaming. We had an active neighbourhood and I knew most of our neighbours. I was certain if I did that someone would help. However, I couldn't manage to get up the courage to just move, because I would have had to run past him, and I was scared I would run right into his grip. Just then, our dog came bolting out and began to bark ferociously, and he backed up a bit. She was a small dog, but it was enough. She was followed by my dad, who is 6'3" and pretty big. He yelled out, "Hey, who are you?" Then he just looked at me and said, "What are you doing just standing there without a weapon?" The guy got very flustered and backed up. My dad looked back at him and said, "What are you doing here?" The guy started to say there were some trash cans knocked over in the alley and he wasn't sure who they belonged to. My dad told him to show him, and they went into the alley. My dad came back a few minutes later and said there were no garbage cans knocked over, and that the guy's car was parked a few houses down in the alley. My dad didn't call the police. In a few choice words, he told him to get out of the area and don't come back. It just wasn't really in his nature to call the cops, because he was a gun owner and came from a bad upbringing, and had a mentality of handling things on his own. I felt guilty that we didn't call, because that person most likely did find a victim. My dad then proceeded to bring me into the garage and point out the axe and crowbar hanging right next to the door I used to come out of the garage. Then he yelled at me for several minutes for not grabbing one on my way out. Number 3. This happened to my older brother back when we lived in the city of London. One winter night in 1997, he and his friends were about 15 when this happened, and they were out on their bikes in Battersea Park, which is huge and bang in the middle of the city. It was very windy and everything was lit up orange. The street lights have an orange tint. And describing the part of the park it took place in, it was a long, wide, dark road from the main large black entrance, lined with gigantic orderly trees. About 200 metres down the road is a crossroad. In the centre, a large Victorian bandstand, black painted metal and white marble floor. He and about 5 or 6 friends were riding around on the raised floor, trying to kick each other off and just generally messing about. Now, my brother and his friends were, for lack of a better word, tough. They come from a bad neighbourhood, typical fighting, shouting street kids, so they are pretty much the only people brave and stupid enough to be in a city park after dark, or so they thought. After kicking each other around on the bandstand, my brother noticed Mark staring off to the distance. Thinking nothing of it, he continued to play. Then he heard him say, boys, come here." He pointed to a distant tree line of a wooded area. "There's a guy behind that tree." They all looked and saw a shadowy figure shuffling around behind a tree, and then running behind another, seemingly trying not to be seen. The wind began to pick up and throw the leaves around the bandstand. My brother noticed something else moving deeper in the woods, behind the figure. It too ran from one tree to another. Mark said, "There's more than one, I think." Before he could finish his sentence, at least 15 men in hoods burst from behind different trees and started full-on sprinting towards the bandstand. My brother said that the bit that sticks in his mind is the way they moved. like they genuinely wanted to sneak up on them, and they ran like someone not just trying to scare them, but really trying to get them. My brother and his friends turned and pedalled as hard as they could towards the black entrance gate. Down the long wide dark road he said he could hear the hooded men, panting and breathing heavily, not saying a word, just running. Reaching the gate, they exited the park and turned out to an empty city street. Looking behind, he saw one standing by the entrance, another standing in the middle of the road, watching my brother and his friends ride away. Now, my brother's a fully grown man with a family, but he's still scared to enter that park after dark. Hooded men from Battersea Park? Let's not meet. Number 4. I was home alone, sitting by my computer, watching YouTube, when I see a shadow on the wall behind my monitor. I look over my shoulder and out the window behind me. The window looks out to our front yard from the office room I was in. I see nothing out of the ordinary. I look back at the wall and the shadow is gone. Seconds later, it's back, but only for a moment. It appeared to be a shadow of a head. Being the paranoid teenager I am, I began to panic. I stood up and walked over to the window. My dog is usually in the front yard, waiting for my dad to get back. I couldn't see him. Then I noticed something. The bolt we put on our gate to stop it from opening was lying on the ground. This meant someone was here, or someone is here. I left the office room and crept down the hallway to see if my dog is in the backyard. Before I even leave the hallway, I could see a man looking through the window of our back door. He was wearing jeans and a big hoodie. He doesn't see me as I try to creep back to the office. A loud knock came from the front door. No way the man in the backyard would have been able to get to the front door so fast. It would have to be someone else. More knocks come from the door. Soon, a voice of a middle-aged sounding man comes from the other side.
Hello?
I didn't say anything.
I saw you before.
At this point, I am sweating buckets. I check my pockets for my phone. I don't have it. I peer into the doorway of the office room, and it's there on the computer desk. Going in there and getting it means being seen by the man outside. I quickly tiptoe into the room and grab the phone. On my way back into the hallway, I see the man's face looking into the room. He looked like a normal guy, but his eyes were shaking left and right, short distances at an extremely fast pace. He also had his mouth wide open in a smile, with his tongue hanging out. Pure primal terror rushed through my body when I saw that face. I screamed, "I'm calling the police." I began to dial. I hear loud, fast-paced footsteps from the driveway. By the time the police came, no one was around. They dusted for fingerprints, and the results were unsatisfying. The police said they were wearing gloves. I gave them the description of the man, and they left. I'm now posting what happened on Reddit, while my dad is calling family to tell them what happened. My dog is missing. Number 5. On Monday, at 11:14, I was walking out from my room and decided to watch some TV before I was going to go to sleep. I turned my head because I thought my cat wanted to come in from outside. But there, I saw a guy in his late 50s watching me, just standing there. His smile was the most creepiest smile I've ever seen. Now, I'm sitting there just shocked, watching him. Then I remember that I have a knife close to me, so I rush for it. Meanwhile, he is trying to break the door lock. I pick up the knife and hide behind a wall. He breaks the lock and starts searching around for me. When he is around 3 to 5 feet away from me, I pop up and it scares the crap out of him. He ran towards the door and I ran after him. I managed to throw my knife and hit his left leg. The knife goes in perfectly and he screams from pain, drags out the knife and throws it on the grass. I call the police and they arrest him later that night. So, creepy window guy, if you ever get out of jail, let's not meet, because if we do, I'm ready for you. Number 6. I live in a rural area and it's somewhat really quiet at times. I live near the woods, where sometimes I go jogging with my sister, usually during early mornings when the sun hasn't risen yet, since we have a busy schedule. One particular morning, I was getting ready for a nice run through the woods, but my sister was too lazy and refused to run with me, so I went alone. It felt weird and scary being alone for the first time, but I quickly forgot about it. 15 minutes later though, I felt like I wasn't alone, like someone was following me. I looked behind me and I saw a person. Since it was dark and the person was far away, I thought it was my sister finally coming with me. I sighed in relief and I called out to her. She didn't answer back. So I did it again, to no avail. I got creeped out since it was so early and no one except her and me went through here this early. I decided it was time to head home, but I didn't want to pass this person, so I went another direction, which took a long time to get me to my house. But it did, and I went back inside. I forgot about it, since it didn't seem that bad. It could have been anyone in our town. Why was I so worried? Fast forward to the next night. Me and my sister were asleep. I woke up to the sound of someone knocking on our window. I opened my eyes to see this freaky looking guy outside our window. He had a cartoonish smile that was wide, and he looked crazy. He started to bang on the glass, and I screamed. My sister woke up and saw the man and went to get the phone to call the police. By this time, he had already made a crack on the window. I'm in tears, and my sister was crying her eyes out. We called the police. During this whole procedure, this guy never moved a muscle, and he never stopped smiling. When the police came, they arrested him, and as they drove him away, he looked at us with that smile and waved. We moved from that town. Creepy smiling dude? Let's not meet. Number 7. Back when I was 10 years old, my family decided to take a visit to my hometown of Ecuador. We went for the summer and planned out just about our whole stay. One day, Mum and Dad were getting ready to go to a wedding, and I was in the house with them. My big sister went over to a friend's house, and my other relatives had already left for the wedding. I was supposed to stay home, alone for the duration, but I saw that it was a beautiful day out and decided to ask my mum and dad to go to the park that was no more than 2 blocks away. They were reluctant at first, stating that there would be nobody to take care of me, but I argued that it was a beautiful day out and there was no way that the park would be empty. They kept getting dressed as I kept on arguing, until they finally gave in. They said that I could go to the park as long as I was back before dark. I agreed and ran outside to head for the park. It took me no more than 10 minutes to get there, and I was ready to make new friends and play around. But oddly enough, there was nobody else in the park. It looked abandoned, which was weird seeing as how this was one of the 2 parks in the whole city. It should have been packed. But I paid no mind to it. I believe I ran over to a swing set, or slide. It was 12 years ago and I can't remember. But I played around. As I played, I suddenly heard a voice from the distance. A clown was on the other side of the gate, and he was motioning for me to get closer. Behind him was a white van, which I had noticed before, but just thought it was a delivery truck of sorts. I slowly started walking towards the clown, and stopped a good distance away from him. He asked me, in Spanish, "Hey kid, do you like clowns?" I nodded no, and he gave me that clown frown, and then he said, "Well then, let me see if I can change that." He opened up his car, and by looking inside, I saw that there were only 2 boxes, though I wasn't sure what they were filled with. And that was it. No seats, no posters, just those 2 boxes, and then complete emptiness. Being a child, I still paid no mind to it, and watched as he pulled out a deflated balloon. He wrapped his lips around the end and blew till the balloon was fully inflated. He tied the end and started to form the balloon into a balloon animal of a dog. He showed it to me, and I smiled. He then motioned me to come closer, to which I complied. He handed the balloon to me and said, "Do you like it?" I nodded yes this time, and gave him a little smile. He then grinned in the creepiest way possible. The grin was so creepy that even as a kid I knew to back away a bit. The clown then said that if I wanted to see the rest of his tricks, I would have to get into the truck. I told him that the exit was on the other side of the park and I wouldn't be able to climb the small gate. He then said the few words that haunt me to this day. "Get a little closer and I'll carry you over. Then we can have loads of fun in my truck. Come on, kid." While saying this, he still had that creepy grin plastered across his face. I merely backed away and told him, "No, it's okay, sir." His grin turned into anger, as though he was annoyed at this. He placed his hands on his hips and said to me, "Ah, but we were going to have so much fun." Right when he said this, I heard a voice on the other side of the park yelling, "Son, son, I'm here to pick you up." I turned and saw a man that I recognised as a local neighbour. He was not my real father, obviously, but the little me knew to run over to him. I said nothing to the clown. I just ran to the man and I gave him a hug. The man waved to the clown and said, "Thanks for keeping my kid entertained." To which he replied, "No problem." As we turned round, I was able to hear the man murmur, "Sicko." I looked at him and asked, "Sir, what exactly is going on?" He gave a sigh and explained everything. As it turns out, that was no real clown. He was a man that had been kidnapping kids across all of Ecuador. He would lure kids with a clown costume and then take them away to God knows what place. He said that he was walking by when he noticed that I was talking to the clown and ran over, basically to save me. As he told me this, he also dialed for the police to report the incident. We had finally arrived at my house and the man said, "Be careful with who you talk to, son. Not everyone is who they seem." I gave him one final hug and gave him a thanks for saving me from that sicko. He gave me a rub on the head and said, "It's okay, my boy. Now hurry on in. I have my own things to worry about." I nodded and ran into the house. Nobody was there, and by the time they had returned, I had decided not to tell anyone, since I knew they'd flip out. It took a while to forget the whole incident, especially with those words that kept reminding me of him. But I soon forgot, until I came across this page and memories of that clown flooded my head. I'm not quite sure what happened to that sicko, but hopefully he is now behind bars. Hopefully. So, to that creepy clown from long ago, let's not meet.